What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9. This is another video. This time we have some commentated Star Wars Unlimited gameplay with two more aggressive decks. This time we have my Double Aggro Sabine from earlier, playing against Woo from Late Night Gaming, who's running Aggression Boba. We're both running Tarkin Town here, and let's see how this goes. Thinking about my resource decisions here. So I resource one disabling Fang Fighter and keep another one. I only have two in the deck and had both in my starting hand. Lead off with the Green Squadron A-Wing, two cost 1/3 with Raid 2. My opponent plays a First Legion Snowtrooper, two cost 2/3 that gets +2 attack and overpower when attacking a damaged unit. In this situation, I am happily going to do 3 damage to the base with the Green Squadron A-Wing, one of the best turn 1 units in the game. And amusingly for me, my opponent plays a Fallen Lightsaber on the Snowtrooper right after I had resourced the other Fang Fighter, which does mean that the I had the perfect counter to this play and resourced it and ended up playing a basic X-Wing instead. I think that was a substantial error for me. I don't actually know. I think I have been thinking that I could play X-Wing and then also Infiltrator's Skill. Luckily, I do have a copy of Aggression here, so I can choose to deal 4 damage and defeat the upgrade, which will in fact take out the Snowtrooper. My opponent plays a TIE Interceptor, defeating my A-Wing. I'm going to use Sabine's ability for 1 damage to each base. My opponent plays a basic Stormtrooper. I deploy Sabine, and then I'm going to have Sabine attack and defeat that Stormtrooper, and then also dealing 1 damage to the enemy base in the process. I also have my X-Wing here. Sabine takes 3 damage herself from defeating the Death Star Stormtrooper. I also have my X-Wing, so I could trade the X-Wing with the Interceptor, but I prefer to try to push damage to the base. Um, and unfortunately, these draws aren't what I most want to see, but we'll see what I can do with them. Okay. This is not an amazing situation for me here, but it could be worse. My opponent trades the Interceptor for the X-Wing. So I could play Dodonna. I could play, I think like the most. So I play Infiltrator's Skill, giving Sabine +1/+1, and Saboteur. Not an amazing play, unfortunately. My opponent deploys Boba. I can deploy General Dodonna here. I could also play the Fighters for Freedom. I end up deciding I'm going to Fleet Lieutenant Sabine into the enemy base. Um, and that will do a good chunk of damage. Ends up being 6 damage, 2 damage base, 2 damage from the Fleet Lieutenant, 1 damage from Infiltrator's Skill, 1 damage from Sabine's ability. But Boba is still going to be able to defeat Sabine here. My opponent plays a Probe Droid. I reveal Dodonna and the Fighters for Freedom. Not what I would most like to have in hand, but could be worse. My opponent has Boba attack and defeat Sabine. I take the initiative here. And my opponent's able to stand up 2 resources with Boba for doing that because he defeated the X-Wing earlier and then plays Boba Fett the unit. So I have a terrible board disadvantage. I draw cards that don't let me contest it, and I'm just going to concede at this point. I don't think I'm going to be able to stabilize, and we're going to go to round 2. This Sabine deck is very aggressive and very kind of early game. I do have some copies of Mace Windu in here, but I don't think I was going to live long enough to play them. Tough game for me. I was not able to get my footing there, but we're gonna do a rematch and see if I can do any better. So game 2, once again gonna go for with a Green Squadron A-Wing start. This time not resourcing my disabling Fang Fighter in case I'm gonna be able to get that value I think resourcing the second disabling Fang Fighter rather than that Alliance X-Wing was kind of a critical blunder for me. If I had kept, because the thing is, deploying a Fang Fighter is actually probably better than deploying an X-Wing, and I don't think I was going to play the Infiltrator's skill. So, like, yeah, I don't know. 3-2 is probably better than 2-3. And in the event that my opponent played a big attachment, which he did, destroying that would have been awesome upside and put me in a position where then on turn 3, instead of having to use aggression to clear my opponent's snowtrooper, I could have deployed a unit of my own, maybe deploy Dodonna, who I think I had in hand at that time, and then be fighting much harder rather than the just trying to control what my opponent had done there. Um, I have a wing leader to buff my Green Squadron A-Wing. My opponent plays a Star Wing Scout. I attack in with the A-Wing. My opponent takes the initiative rather than attacking with the Snowtrooper. I use Sabine's ability for 1 damage to each base. Star Wing Scout is a 4/1, and when defeated, if you have the initiative, you draw 2 cards. So it definitely makes keeping the initiative more relevant than it might be otherwise. My opponent has a waylay to send the Green Squadron A-Wing back to hand. I think I don't remember. I think on this turn, I think I attack. Yeah, I attack the base with the wing leader. That's 2 more damage. And then my opponent could trade the Star Wing Scout for the wing leader, which would then draw 2 cards. But actually ends up, I think. Yeah, no, it does end up doing that. Was thinking about attacking the base maybe, but ends up taking the trade there that also draws 2. I play the A-Wing back from having been waylaid. Waylay is a very interesting card. It's very strong for Boba Fett because he gets a resource when an enemy unit leaves play. So Waylay, even though it doesn't defeat the unit, does give you that resource back. So it essentially only costs 2. I play Sabine Wren the unit as well, and then my opponent plays a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, sending the First Legion Snowtrooper in and defeating the Sabine unit. I use Sabine's ability and then have Sabine attack the enemy base directly. One other option that I could have gone for this turn is I could have played General Dodonna, which would have had a lot of value, but actually, I think the way that I played it ended up being substantially better because that Snowtrooper Lieutenant would have been able to have the First Legion Snowtrooper defeat Dodonna. Would have been a trade, but yeah. My opponent leads off with a forced choke, immediately defeating my Sabine Wren. I do draw a card, though. I have the A-Wing in position to hit the enemy base for 3, and that's what I do. Boba Fett deploys. I'm going to Tarkin Town here to clear that unit. Might have been unnecessary, but it's just one of those things where it's like I'm trying to lower my opponent's ability to race. I play a Green Squadron A-Wing again. My opponent's hitting my base here, doing some damage. I think my opponent shouldn't have been able to get that resource back. Because Sabine didn't leave play. Leaders don't leave play when they're defeated. They just go to their leader side. I don't think he ends up actually using the resource, but I think that was maybe misplayed there. So we see a an interceptor shows up and defeats the Fang Fighter that I played. I'm basically just trying to play out more units that can contest the space arena here. Interceptor is very dangerous to these A-Wings because the A-Wings only have 1 power on defense. So I lead off by having an open fire, because hopefully allowing both my A-Wings to attack the enemy base this turn. My opponent brings out Fett's Fire Spray, not what I want to see. I have an A-Wing hit the base for 3. The Fett's Fire Spray defeats the other A-Wing, taking only 1 damage. I bring out a Star Wing Scout. So my opponent could take the initiative here. If he takes the initiative, he's in a relatively better spot, but ends up attacking with Boba, which stands up 2 resources because he defeated one of my ships. And then he plays a probe droid and sees that I have a surprise strike in hand. And with 18 damage on a 25 life base, surprise strike on the Starwing Scout is 7 damage and the end of the game. So my opponent concedes there. The probe droid, unfortunately, just showing that it was a kind of a checkmate situation. Okay, so then we're going to go to game three, 1-1, going into game three. As is the case with a bunch of these Sabine games, these are fast games, so I think we're about a bit more than 10 minutes into the video and we've already played two games. So now, to be fair, the first one I did concede early and that would have gone longer if we had played it out. Um, Resourcing up here. I can start with either the Green Squadron A-Wing or with Sabine Wren, the unit here, which is a pretty good spot to be in. Depending on what my opponent does, I know this opponent's playing shoot first, so what I want to do is deploy to the arena that he's not in to negate that in this situation where he's going to have the initiative. So my opponent plays a basic tie, and I decide I'm going to play a Sabine unit instead of playing my A-Wing. My opponent takes the initiative, so I use Sabine's ability to push damage to both bases. In general, that ability is good to use when you're the aggressor, and Sabine is usually the aggressor, wanting to end the game quickly. My opponent's TIE fighter hits my base here for 2 damage. I'm going to have Sabine, the unit, attack for 3 damage. My opponent brings out Boba Fett unit. I play the Fighters for Freedom, 3 cost, 3/4 with Saboteur, and when you play another red card, deal 1 damage to the enemy base. I then use Sabine's ability for 1 damage to each base. I have an aggression here. I have a wing leader, so the wing leader could buff either the Fighters for Freedom or Sabine. The Starwing Scout here might be my weakest card. Like, it is a good card, but I don't have the initiative, but it might be good later. I have a Wampa, which is sort of a big unit. So I end up resourcing there, and then my opponent uses Sabine to defeat or Boba to defeat Sabine. I used Tarkentown to defeat Boba. This is a mistake. What I should have done is attacked with the Fighters for Freedom. That it wasn't a priority to Tarkentown Boba because he'd already attacked that turn, and this allows my opponent to play a waylay and send my Fighters for Freedom back to hand. I could have had 3 more damage on the enemy base right there if I had just gone for the attack instead of waiting, or even if I had played the Wampa, it would have allowed at least 1 damage there. Um, I was going to deploy Sabine. My opponent deploys a probe droid, and I was like, actually, sorry, can I use ability? Actually, my opponent lets me do it, which is generous. Um, so my opponent knows what I have in hand. I take 2 damage there from the tie. I deploy Sabine Wren. Sabine defeats the probe droid, taking 3 damage, and puts 1 damage on the enemy base. What I was thinking there, so I could have had 2 more damage on the enemy base if I had just attacked it directly. After the previous game where Sabine was defeated immediately by forced choke, I figure, like, she's already in the danger zone here. I may as well sacrifice some of the hit points on her in order to take out the base, or inflict base damage there. My opponent leads off by deploying Boba. If he has a shoot first, he can have Boba kill the Wampa in 1 shot. So I have the Wampa attack instead of Sabine. Boba can, of course, defeat Sabine now, but the Wampa gets its damage in. And now I'm going to play out some other cards. So I can't make a good aggression play here, but I can play the Fighters for Freedom, and then I can play the A-Wing and deal 1 bonus damage to the enemy base with the Fighters for Freedom for playing another aggression card, assuming my opponent doesn't kill them immediately. My opponent throws one of those fallen lightsabers throws a fallen lightsaber onto Boba Fett, giving him +3/+3. I deploy the fighters for the A-wing. The fighters for freedom deals 1 damage to the enemy base, and my opponent takes the initiative. I pass. So I think what we're going to see here is Boba is going to attack. I think we're going to see Boba attack and defeat my Wampa before it has a chance to do anything this turn. Um, my opponent's My opponent's 7/10 Boba Fett there. Pretty nasty. Though he has taken 2 damage, so I guess he's only a 7/8. Defeats the Wampa. Um, I have the Fighters for Freedom and the A-Wing on the field. So one thing that I can do here is I can just attack with the A-Wing immediately, which means that if my opponent has an interceptor or a shoot first, he's not going to be able to remove that 3 damage that I would be able to do. Another thing that I could do is I could play aggression, but it makes more sense to just take the attack here because I want to get that damage in before my opponent has potential removal to deal with my unit. My opponent plays a Fet's Fire Spray here. Um, I do have a surprise strike in hand to hopefully close the game. I'm going to play a second Fighters for Freedom, which inflicts 1 damage with my first Fighters for Freedom. I actually have a nasty situation here too for the opponent because there isn't anything to defeat one of these Fighters for Freedom. Now I'm going to be able to play the Green Squadron A-Wing that I have in hand, and it will actually deal 2 damage to the enemy base just for playing it because the Fighters for Freedom will both get their abilities. So the opponent takes the initiative, and yeah, there's that A-Wing, and it inflicts 2 damage on the enemy. And then I think I'm going to use Sabine's ability as well. And then my opponent is now on 22 damage, and I have 4 different units that can all attack and destroy the base in one hit. So with that, I think it is GG. There's just there's nothing that can clear all these units. So it does end up being a victory for Sabine, and ultimately went 2-1 with the double aggro Sabine versus the aggression Boba. Interesting situation overall. Interesting situation overall. Uh, in the first game I got destroyed, and then in the other two I was able to do better. Um, but yeah, it's some very aggressive gameplay and a quicker video than most. I think we're a little bit less than 17 minutes now, and we have just played 3 games. So yeah, that's gonna about do it for this one. We do have deck lists. Both my deck list and my opponent's deck list are going to be in the video description below, so feel free to check those out. Thank you to Woo from the Late Night Gaming crew for making that deck list available. And additionally, I'm going to have a link in the video description below to my introductory article over at the Fifth Trooper blog for anyone who might be trying to figure out sort of the basics of the game, or maybe has a friend who is. You can check out that article. It kind of goes over what I think is cool about this game relative to some other stuff, other games that people may have played in this space, and also discusses just like the basics of what a card looks like, how that works, that sort of thing. All right, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thanks to you all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.